So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find then the scripture used, the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we understand the time of the end as per then the instructions of the holy prophets. And then, as a very important emphasizing, there is no new understanding. We are living during the time of restoration and reduction, and that implicitly means restoration. There is not a segment of the instructions new when speaking of restoration. Whatsoever was then must be re-established. So then whatsoever then, obviously the prophet Yirmiyahu then explained to us, then the returning of the holy cities must be done in a certain way, obviously, and then the holy cities return to service, and then the artifacts used then in the Holy of Holies and in the Holy Tabernacles, because we're speaking of tabernacling, including the first service and the second service. That's where you get your understanding from Galah or Revelation then regarding the first and second menorahs. Both menorahs in the presence of the Creator. First service, second service. Then from this viewpoint there is no news. Absolutely no news from the standpoint of tabernacling. You may not understand the viewpoint of tabernacling yet. You may find yourself far away from the Holy of Holies or then tabernacling. So then when you begin to understand there is no news, it must not be any news, because we are simply restoring. So then, starting from the Israelic lineage, we understand Yirmiyahu, the 61st chapter, and then studying this scripture we understand from then the first segment of the scripture from the Quran. The first holy scripture comes then is the Quran. We can't avoid but read the Quran because it comes from the first son. We are speaking of restoration, not only of tabernacling. We are speaking of restoration, the first contact the Creator had with a human being obviously was Ibrahim. So then we must study the Quran. There is no way out of it. So then, previously we were talking about an understanding of the many items then the Ishmaelites did travel with them on camels. So we read these from the Holy Quran, Sura 22 Al-Hajj. The 22, then 36. And we have made for you the camels for sacrifice as among of the symbols from Allah. This means not the sacrifice of camels. It simply explains what they are having on top of them. Because the Ishmaelites were traders. They used to do trade. Then we find the first indication very clearly from the time of Joseph. Joseph then is from the lineage of Yitzhak, or the Israelic lineage from the second son, the younger brother. So then we read it very clearly. What they were bringing upon those camels were then part of it given as gifts. Gifts of being thankful for then the Creator, given then the leadership. So then you understand those who then given the leadership so that you may be thankful. So this is the context. And then later we find then in Sura 22 Al-Hajj 22nd chapter and 41st verse, you find those are the believers who, if we establish them firmly in power, in a land, they establish a regular prayer and give a regular charity, enjoying then the right and forbid wrong. And with the Creator rests the end of every situation. Obviously, they were traders. People doing trade. So this, you understand, the first section, there is no relation with sacrifice of camels, but what they are bringing on top of it, or on the top of them. So then, those who are believers, they are understanding themselves as being the believers, and obviously they are very reliable, truthful, honest, because they represent what the Creator has given them, leadership of the trade ship. This is explained very clearly. Then 42nd, and if they treat your cause for Islam as untrue, like so did the peoples from them, the people of Noah, for instance. So then we begin our understanding from another area of the spiritual walk. But the most important is then understanding 42nd speaks of Islam. Obviously, comes from the first son, Ishmael. But then the context of this 22nd chapter of Sura Al-Hajj shows us very clear in the 41st verse. So then those areas of trade, they establish a regular prayer and give regular charity. It's not charity per se. It is what Ishmaelites back then had established among themselves, what they should do as a people when they do trade. A section of their trade was set aside for a specific purpose, because this service of this purpose had a link with the divine. So that's why they are very grateful for, because the Creator has given them the camels to take the burden from their backs, and then in exchange they would give a section of their provisions for being thankful. So then we understand the lineage from where they come from. And then the rest of these understandings relating tabernacling, those are extras. We should be very grateful for having these extras on the Quran, because the Quran always balanced. The Quran is absolutely 100% balanced, but sometimes we readers, as the Quran has stated very clearly, we must be enlightened. Enlightenment must come first, so then we understand how to read the Quran. So it's 100% sure, but then we have to be enlightened, as the Quran has explained. And we understand there were many editors of the Holy Quran, and sometimes they use a few words that were wrong, but those were the fault of the translators, never the Quran. It's obvious, because they are dealing with the Creator Himself. Because they stated very clearly, those who are believers, who if we establish them firmly in power, power is explaining then the area where they were given the leadership. So can we find any fault with the leadership of the Creator? Of course not. If we find any discrepancy in the Holy Quran, it's because the translators, sometimes they used words that were not compatible with other languages. So then we begin our quest, never questioning the Quran, but always being enlightened first. Then we study, we read, we ask guidance, and then we speak. So then we would never be in a position where we would question the Quran. But then we enlighten and we expand it, so then people of the world can understand the holy understandings of it, making the Quran absolutely precise. So then we can learn from. So please stay tuned. Much more coming up.